Hi, and welcome to the Road to Sustainability show. For this special episode, I'm excited to share the mic with two exceptional ladies. Dr. Sara Murdock. Sara is a global people and culture leader specializing in future-proof, agile strategy based on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Rita Kakati-Shah. Rita is an award-winning gender, diversity, inclusion, and career strategist, speaker, author, and advisor. She is also the founder and CEO of UMA, empowering confidence, success, and resilience in women and minorities. We talk about diversity, inclusion, and leadership, and how much important it is to bring value to the society as a woman. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Sara. Hi, Rita. I'm super excited to have you today. It's a special edition from the Road to Sustainability show, a great episode. I look forward to having a lot of experience sharing and telling the audience some of your tips and tricks about diversity, inclusion, and ethics. So let's get started. Rita, please tell us a bit more about you.
Sure. So I'm Rita, born and bred Londoner, started my career in finance. I was in investment banking for about 10 years. So I got into diversity and inclusion just by being one of very few women on the trading floor in Europe in the first place. So I kind of got into it when it wasn't even called diversity and inclusion officially back in the early 2000s. I then transitioned careers into the pharmaceutical industry. I was in business development, so I got to travel here and there around the world. And that brought me to New York, which is where I now live, and moved here after I got married. I have two small children who are now 6 and 8. And I took some time off to raise them and really got to see that, wow, out of all of the careers I've had, motherhood by far was the most challenging. And that is really what led to me helming UMA, which is the empowerment platform to really build confidence and boost up women and minority groups around the world. So a lot of coaching and mentoring and a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion training and talks to corporations around the world as well. So that's me in a nutshell. So happy to be here today to discuss this with you ladies.
Amazing. We have a fantastic episode that we recorded a few weeks ago with Rita, and I invite you to hear it and to let us know what you think. Sara, hi.
Yes, hello. I'm so pleased to be here, Yael and Rita. You are rock stars. You inspire me, so I'm very excited for our chat today. Just a little bit about me. I've been working in what we now call diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for about 15 years. I sort of start off in that way because to me, these are the terms that are sort of hot and popular at the moment. And really, I see my work as being a sort of instigator or even a trickster, you might say, of improving organizational health. I see a lot of my role as actually holding space for the anxieties and the nervousness about what comes with change. So I started out in this field as an educator. I began by teaching and leading workshops and teams. And over the years, I developed a deep expertise in the research behind this work. And I achieved a Ph.D. in social impact within intercultural programs. And recently, one of my major roles, I would argue sort of one of my leadership positions, has actually been in helping folks in the West and in North America understand this whole conversation is not owned by the West, it's not owned by North America. I'm sure we'll touch on today as well, that diversity, quote unquote, is indeed a global question. And it's an opportunity for all of us to actually learn across difference and to be inspired by difference rather than to try to control it or manage it as though it's a problem to be overcome. So that's just a little bit of me and my approach, and I'm very, very excited to speak about gender specifically. To me, it's one of the sort of least discussed components often in North America, and I'm thrilled to touch on that with you today.
Fantastic. It's amazing. First of all, it's amazing to have both of you. I have a very direct question, Sara, Rita. What made you and what makes you today who you are? It's a tough question.
First.
Okay, so I think everything that I've ever done in my entire life, what I'm doing now, is because of my journey because of my experiences. So, for example, with me, I started off in banking, and I got into diversity inclusion because, as I mentioned, I was the only, at the time, woman on the pan-Euro sales trading desk in London for a while. And so I've been actually in the diversity and inclusion space for, oh gosh, it's been well over 2 decades now. We're coming on to a quarter of a century, giving my age away there almost. So it was very much in terms of just that gender equality space which I was in, and various functions through my life. You know, as an American now with British origin, with Assamese heritage, growing up in the UK, where quite often, you know, I came from a cultural background where my parents came from a background where quite often women weren't working, women's voices weren't heard, were respected, but weren't heard in a certain way. You know, women were the caregivers, they weren't the breadwinners. And then that philosophy came with them to the UK. My parents have always been so supportive in my career. And then I guess from my perspective, I didn't go down the traditional route. You know, my parents are like, you're going to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor, my mum's from the same field, my whole family are. And I did actually study it to start with, and then I quit after 2 years. So I think in my instance, my journey started when I started to acknowledge the answer of the feeling of the word no, and to take empowerment and take your life into your own decisions, in being able to tell your own story and what you're about from your own personal experiences. And I didn't realize that until I was in the situation. Otherwise, it was all theory. And I think everything in my life that I've done has been because of my practical experiences like that. Whether, fast forward, it was a motherhood journey, whether it was being, you know, the only, you know, person of a minority background in a room full of white men trying to pitch some philosophy or some sort of concept, and people understood what I was saying was right, then they weren't resonating. Or I walk in the room for the first time, and the first thing people see, because it only takes 6 seconds going to research to make your mind about somebody, I was just a pretty face in a business suit, rather than what it was to say. So through those experiences, my life experiences taught me to sort of, how do you turn things on its head? How do you change that bias? How can you take control of the narrative and change people's perceptions and their perspective to define your own reality? Because as people say, perception is reality. But how do you change that? So my entire philosophy when I go to organizations, when I coach women, when I'm coaching CEOs of companies about how they see diversity, equity, inclusion, is about literally changing that narrative on its head to start from scratch. So that's really what it's been about. It's a long-winded answer to your question, Yael, but, you know, I have so many stories and ways of answering that, you know, I'll leave you with that for the moment.
No, it is inspiring. Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, you know, just asking everything you're working on is really inspirational. So thank you for your work. And it's interesting too. I did not have an experience, right, in a male-dominated field in any way. So sort of listening to you speak, I was considering, you know, what are the elements that are maybe sort of less contrast-based that still have helped me and have helped some others sort of figure out that identity is a piece of this puzzle. And I think for me, starting at a young age, for whatever reason, I frequently had the experience that people couldn't pigeonhole me. Like, people would want to say, oh, you're a this or you're a that. And I'd say, well, sort of, but not exactly. And I would notice how much it would make people squirm. Now, to be clear, I wasn't doing this intentionally, right? This wasn't a mind game or a power trip. I just had this experience enough time over the years, starting at a pretty young age, that I noticed, you know, oh, this is interesting. People really want to label me. Oh, you're the this girl, or you're the that one, or you're the this or that. And then, but well, again, yeah, sort of a little, like 5% or 10% over here, but I do a bunch of other stuff too. And so I think just feeling that and noticing that really informed my sort of obsession with intersectionality before I even had heard that term, right? And some of it too, I mean, even the sort of weird little details about my life, like having very curly hair I can't tell you how many conversations that started. I've had people come up to me on the street and want to talk all about their background, my background, and heritage, and this and that. So even just little things like that. And then also noticing that most people don't know how to cut curly hair. Now, this might sound very sort of trivial, trite, this and that, but it's actually a bit of a sort of perception thing, right? It's about norms, and it's about what's comfortable or what's considered other or unusual. Now, I've been really fortunate. People have, just to go with a pair metaphor, been very complimentary, right? And in other ways in my life, people have been mostly complimentary and supportive. So I don't want to, claim some sort of huge encumberment, in my life's experience. But I will say that it's easy to notice the ways in which people want to soothe their own, again, I'll sort of reference back to anxiety, want to soothe their own curiosities or anxieties and say, oh, if I can pigeonhole you or if I can put you in this box, then I feel better because I know what I'm feeling. And so that asking that question of how do we become more relational of who you are as a full entity and who I am as a full entity, and when we come together in that spirit, it might sound cheesy, but I truly think that that's when human beings can accomplish literally anything. And so that's sort of become my obsession over the years.
That's amazing, actually, because all of us, all three of us, have somehow a very specific ability to interpret things. If we are looking at the environment that we evolved somehow, and I grew up in a very changing environment. I grew up between two countries, two extremely different cultures, traveled a lot from a very young age, and I had a lot of different kind of experiences, and at some point, I think it was maybe from maybe 20, 25 years old, I had to understand very, very fast that maturity is the key to open the next door. And when you grow up actually in between, two different cultures, home with you're talking, three languages, it brings you a lot of openness and awareness that nobody is equal to nobody else. I think that the very basic today, if I look at what's happening, with the TikTok apps, Instagram and everything, these are the tools that somehow bring what is missing in the households for the kids regarding what's going on all around the world. And we spoke about that, I think, Rita, during our previous podcast. And I think that it's not a bad thing that the technology brings into the household what's going on outside, because it brings openness, it brings, new views. But somehow, and that's related to what you said, Sara, I think that the key to step up as a girl and then after as a young lady into a complex world with different kinds of societies actually requires a lot of confidence and somehow a lot of inner power that we have to unleash, and we cannot do that so fast, because when you grow up, in the maturity, in the maturity, and then after you have to get into the university, you have to learn something new, you discover your new comrades, and you discover new perspectives. It's very, very complicated, and it's going to be even more complicated because of the plurality and diversity of disciplines that we have to learn as we grow. I think that we're getting into a world that requires to know a lot of languages, a lot of cultures, understand and acknowledge that everything is infinite, and we have to be even more specific in what we want to do and where we want to go to convince the others or to join us or to join them. And leadership is not the leadership that we had, 50 years ago or maybe 15 years ago. And we have to learn what's leadership today and maybe build it from the scratch. And I mean, that's part of the confidence and the motivation as a girl, as a woman today, to shape what we want and the way we want to see the world. Yeah. And that's not something that you learn at school or at home, actually. And we have to equip, the future generation. Or they have to equip themselves. So I'm thinking a lot about that, actually.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's your experience? What's the key thing? Maybe you can share with the audience. What was, maybe not too much personal, but what was the key to unlock that thing that made you who you are today?
I think, I know you said not to go too much into the personal, but I think the key, certainly for me, is identity.
Yeah.
Which stems into intersectionality and stems actually into leadership as well. For me, for example, I grew up in the UK in a very lily white neighborhood. So I was the only brown girl in my, white class when I was 5 years old. At the same time, at weekends, my parents signed me up for South Indian, classical Indian dancing. So now I went at the weekends so Monday to Friday, I was the brown girl in a white classroom. At the weekends, I was the fairest. The South Indian classmates are generally a darker skin tone to mine. So now I was the fairest in a dark skin tone, and they wouldn't talk to me. I would be, left out of invited to birthday parties, and they just wouldn't talk to me. So for me, I was like, I was battling, like, who am I? Yeah. What does it mean to be Indian? Because I was just branded as the Indian kid. But, my heritage is from Assam in the northeast. We're from an Aryan race. We're not Dravidian, which is the other part of India, which a lot of people ignore. We're actually two very different races. I was trying to fit in, do what I could, and it was very, very difficult. So I think part of that and learning from a very young age to how to infiltrate the other side. I don't think people were being racist as such. They're too young. We're talking about 5, 6-year-olds. Maybe their parents were in a different background, but from their perspective, we would have conversations about, things on TV, superheroes or whatever. But it was almost like that sense of belonging. How do you find you get a sense of belonging? So I became very empathetic from a very young age, and I found ways of almost just befriending folks that wouldn't accept me. I would find ways of sort of getting into their circle, like, oh, they walk a certain way, or they put their hand like this, or they do that, or, oh, they all plait their hair in a certain way. Think whatever it was to almost try to fit in. So it became very much of an area of trying to fit in initially, but that was almost how to find my identity. And then that was really used to fast forward in my life of how I used to sort of get into situations and have conversations with folks that historically had a very different viewpoint to me. I got into debating, and one good thing about being on a debating team is you suddenly have to pull out either side of the argument, but you don't know which until you get on stage. And that for me taught me a lot, because I personally might have had a certain viewpoint, but I almost have to hide that to put the other side depending on what I was called upon. So I think that's in a way taught me to be who I am and why I became the way I was. Because in the work I do, when I go into boardrooms, when I have to go and almost even out divides after the US elections happened, after an incident happened, the George Floyd incident happened a year ago now in the States, there was a big divide in a lot of boardrooms and companies in the US in particular. And that divide I was called in to fix. I was just told to come and fix the divide. That was, my job. And I was like, what do you mean by fix exactly? Well, we want you to come in and tell, and I'm going to exaggerate here just to give you the example, that you go in and you tell all of the white people that they've got white privilege, they're bad, and all the black people that, we're sorry, we understand, how can we help your communities? In that way, it was almost causing the divide even further, what people don't realize. So in this level of globalization and digital media that you mentioned, it's helping by spreading awareness, but it's also very divisive. Yeah, and Sarah. So one thing I saw is that I am not going to go in to tell people they're bad or they're wrong. I'm going to listen and understand. And one thing they're not doing is understanding different viewpoints and where they come across. And that came from a direct result of my upbringing and sort of infiltrating, understand how do I get in there? How do I get in the head of somebody else who I have no idea who they are, but understand them as though they were me when I left the room. And it's exactly the same thing in my trainings today. I get to the level of where it's almost like you've got to listen, take a step back to understand. Not just listen and truly understand. Understand, where are they coming from? Why do they think that way? Yeah. You don't have to agree at all, but understand. One thing that's missing And this whole DEI debate around the world has just been understanding the empathy before we react. In the age of empowerment that we're all in today, there's a fine line between empowerment and entitlement. We're all being asked to, raise our voice, speak up when we feel right. Yes, that's what empowerment is, but empowerment is about first, before you speak up, to feel confident, to feel you've got in charge, you've got to take a step back, to stop, you listen first, you digest the information, and then you feel empowered to react. Entitlement doesn't do that, you just react. So that's unfortunately what's been going on a lot, and it's just a big thing. So even though we're progressing in so many ways, we're actually falling back in so many other ways too.
Yeah, I can relate to everything that you said. It's really important, and Ruth saying that reactivity, awareness, multi-focuses, I would say, being aware about what's going on outside and inside also, because it's not easy to interpret what's going on the emotional side when you're young, and when you're different, and where you're kind of someone that is not within the rules or inside a certain framework, and can just get into it because somehow you don't know that you have to cultivate your difference. And this is something that is very privileged to do today. For my personal experience, I was always different. Every situation, every year, every environment I got into, or every group I was into, was in France, it was in the UK, it was here in Israel, or anywhere. I was always different, somehow. And this is something that I didn't know until a very late moment of my life, that I have to cultivate my difference. And I have to prove not only to the others, but also to myself that I'm also capable to do things even better than the others. And it takes a long time. I'm not the only one to share this experience, because it takes a long time. It's really about courage. It's really about selflessness. It's really about being okay with yourself and recognize your values. And this is something that you don't know actually until you get some experience and you learn to be the one that is not only different but also brings value. And I see that a lot. I mean, I hear a lot of people inside corporation, inside institutions, or leading, some groups or organizations, telling the others how to do that, because it's not something that if you're not learning it, you by yourself, you will never know. And a lot of organizations I see, especially in tech or in finance also, tell you cultivate your difference. What does it mean? Is it about diversity? Is it about inclusion? Or is it about bringing a new shape or a new balance to the organization to make it more flexible, make it more mature, or leading the way that the organization is also accepting the difference, which is not something that was so inherent in our society during the past 50 years. And that was a question actually that we spoke about. I mean, Sara, you had this conversation with Yangbo precisely about these points. What do we have to do to bring value to the table? What is expected from us in the society and in the business environment to lead a new way, to be not only a number or an employee, but a person that is legitimate to express herself. So who we are.
Isn't that the great question? So I'll maybe go backwards in my answer, because I loved what Rita shared about the difference between responding and reacting. And for me, another way to kind of frame that answer is around value. do I actually need to open my mouth right now? Like, is this helpful for the team, for the group, for the project, and don't get me wrong, I'm not asking people to self-stifle. That's not the argument I'm making. But there's a huge difference between sort of blurting something out to soothe my ego in the moment versus saying, I feel really expressed when I offer this to the group. Even if maybe the group kind of know that. That's okay. That's where we get to psychological safety, right? It's not about agreeing or about, kissing someone's butt or, not being contentious. It's about, is this actually in service of something bigger than just, making myself feel slightly shinier for 2 seconds, right? So that's sort of one, I think, self-checking that literally anybody can do at any point in time, in a boardroom, in a team check-in, while doing your own work, etc. But kind of, time machining it back for a minute. Again, listening to your incredible story, Rita, about how you grew up and sort of the different environments that you were in, I found myself reflecting on being a privileged white woman growing up in an upper middle class suburb of Boston, being on the sort of college/higher education track from a very, very young age, growing up around a lot of, socioeconomically global situations, we'll just put it that way. And yet, part of what formed who I became were two women in my life, right? My mom and my grandma. And a lot of, nodding in recognition there. So on the one hand, my grandmother was Jewish. She's passed now, but she was Jewish, and she grew up during the Great Depression. And I learned a lot about what it meant to experience joy in the face of hardship and pain from her. And then I also watched her, eventually begin to travel the world in her 50s, actually. She had never had the means to do this before. And she also then began to host international travelers who she met in our home. So starting at a very, very young age, even in my own house, I would hear different languages, right? I would hear discussions about, Istanbul or Paraguay. And I'm going, little Sarah's like, where is that? I've never heard that word before, and they would sort of take out the map and show me and tell me stories and whatnot. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that experience really gave me the sense that I'm part of something much, much bigger than me. And it's not about me, right? I am fortunate that I get to sort of be part of this now 8 billion person planet. Who do I want to show up as? So I started asking that at a very young age. Now, in parallel, maybe the sort of more contentious side of that is that my mom, she has not passed, she's still with us, but she's retired now. She taught English as a second language for children for about 45 years. And what was interesting about that is that, my mom is, phenotypically white. She comes from an Irish and Polish background. And also, she was frequently microaggressed and frequently, her expertise was questioned, or she was sort of, there were implicit or explicit accusations that she was some kind of, race traitor, etc., because she was working with immigrants or people who were on visas or green cards from literally around the world, right? And, she had somebody from everywhere over the course of 45 years, and many of these children, right, we're talking 9, 10, 11-year-olds, didn't speak any English. In some cases, their parents were not able to be with them. That depended on the situation. And so I also started to learn at this young age that, on the one hand, we could have this sort of, global, a very sort of beautiful global, home environment. And then we could also sort of look out into the world and see, other professional educators, mind you, not random people on the street, implying that, it was somehow treacherous to be welcoming to, a Chinese family who didn't speak any English, or that it was somehow corrosive to our culture if, my mom was speaking Spanish which she learned in her 20s and retained it to, a family who had just arrived from Venezuela, for example. And so sort of seeing that contrast, I started to learn, maybe at 5 or 6, like, ooh, okay, not everybody feels, to your point about belonging, not everybody feels like they want to facilitate a sense of belonging for others. Now, do I have any answers to that? I'm not going to claim that I have some sort of magical leadership answer that we can all walk away from today. But what I will say about that is that I do believe that a process of asking those questions is helpful to most people. Why is it that I feel X, Y, and Z about my community? Or why is it that I feel equipped to welcome others who may or may not speak the same language as me, or may not look the same as me, or may not worship the same as me? So I do believe that for human beings, we kind of need like a gestation period almost of asking those questions, asking who am I, and who am I most importantly in context of these, 8 billion other human beings who I cohabitate with. I consider, we're all roommates, right? Like, this is a very tiny planet. And, we have like 8 billion roommates. If you like to get along with them, that sounds much more pleasant than fighting, personally. I hope that answers your question. No, I'm not sure that it did.
It opens the door, actually. And thank you, Sara, because it opens the door to, we spoke about values and we spoke about how to express ourselves from the very young age. But, when I go on the TikTok and I slide to see, all these young girls singing and dancing, it's their confidence is just impressive, first of all. I mean, I don't remember myself, being able to dance in front of, anybody. And I think that, this is the difference right now with the new generation. They have all the tools that, we didn't get. And somehow we are fortunate that we knew what's going on outside of the virtual world before. Something that's the kids today, ask them, they don't even know what's going on, if it's not virtual. Let's be honest. And schools and classes are becoming also virtual. So which is, I think on that point, it's very confusing at some point, because the groups and and what we learned and how we learned to behave in the society taught us a lot more than what they are learning right now. In terms of exchanges, in terms of conversation, in terms of curiosity, in terms of everything. But this is the thing here. I think the household has a responsibility to bring the world home. And I think the business environment has this responsibility to continue. But we have to be able to understand where to go and how to behave in order to bring what we've learned home in terms of cultures, in terms of values, in terms of exchanges, and bring it to the business. Because when we speak about blended models, and that's precisely what we want to unleash now. When we speak about new blended models in the society, new business models, and the paradigm shift that currently the crisis brought us, is also about bringing the values of protection, of empathy, as Rita mentioned, about gratitude that we have to provide. Because if you look at what's happening in the corporate world today, or overall in the business world, everybody is behind a screen. Almost all the world got stuck behind screens. So where is the emotional point? Where is the human side? Where is the conversation heading to when you're behind the virtual world? Which leads us back to what's going on with the kids today. And the students also. The students were, almost globally, all the students were shouting the same message. They want to get back to the university. They want to learn in the classrooms. And this is something that is overcrying today. It's overshouting everywhere. You hear people that want to get back to humanity. Is it about a social thing? Or is it something that is more about feeling that you live or feeling being present? I mean, all those questions are legitimate. I mean, actually, to ask. And is it the right thing to do to convert the companies, the physical spaces into the virtual space? Is it right to bring the work at home? All these questions are profound and are changing deeply our society. And I think that here, right now, the crisis is not over. It's ongoing because it's going to lead to many other confusing points or new biases. We're trying to fix the biases from the previous age, but actually we're going to have to lead to face new biases from our current crisis. And that's my question today. I mean, what do we need as human values? Because I'm one of those that believe that, you know, nature and actually provides almost everything that we need by default and by essence. But on our human side, on the societal side, on the emotional side, what is our responsibility to bring the society not back to the previous normal, but to a better normal? And and here we are, and I profoundly believe that that's the role of the women today, to do that. Because I think that we have all the tools to do that.
Yeah.
Do we want it? I don't know. That's my question. So, and that's really, I mean, that's limitless. Here's the point about why do we want so much to lead the way? Why do we want so much to fight ego today as women? Why do we want so much to be bold, first of all as human beings, and then after, you know, as women? And what are the responsibility that we have to endorse on the long way to keep going? Because it's a lot. It's a lot to change the society. It's a lot to change your culture. It's a lot to bring culture. It's a lot to lead a family. It's a lot. I mean, it requires a lot of courage, a lot of things and forces, inner forces that we have. So I'm just asking, do we have them available? And how do we make them available? And what do we need? What are the tools? Who are the people that we have to be surrounded by?
I think it's really interesting how you put all that together. It's such a profound statement that's engulfed us all, in a way, especially over the last year or so. But I think one way of looking at it is us as a society, us as a race, us as humans, and how we are made. We are creatures of habit. Generally, humans, we don't like risk. We like where we are. But we're also creatures of validation. Yeah. Now, this has not changed through centuries, ever. And I'll give you an example. When you mentioned it earlier on that we see these girls on like TikTok or Snapchat or Insta stories just promoting themselves, it does look amazing and confident. But remember, they're validating how many likes they get. At the same time as this digital era has gone up, cyberbullying has also gone up tenfold in that same space. And a lot of it is because of the amount of likes, validations, comments that people are getting at the same time. So are they doing it because they feel confident to talk about, or to dance, or to sing the story? Are they doing it to try and validate themselves on a platform? And that's the thing. We are all validating ourselves in different ways. We want that validation. You know, and this goes across cultures, it goes across socioeconomics, it goes across everything. For example, there could be a conversation at home about why did you do that, or, you know, don't do that because what are our neighbors going to think? Or, oh, if you fail your exams, oh my gosh, what is so-and-so going to think? Rather than, oh my gosh, great job, you did such a good job on that, how about we try a little harder next time? What can I do to help you improve? You know, it's all about what do others think.
Exactly.
When managers, leaders get DEI training, do they really want it? My first question is, why do you want this? When I go into any company, my first question is, why are you doing this? They're like, huh? Is it because they're trying to check a box? because everyone else is doing it? Or is it because there's an actual mission-driven statement that's within their cultural values that they're trying to do it for? And we're trying to get to the latter here. So it's everything about society in general. Everything needs validation in a different way. So in one way, and there's no easy answer to this yet, otherwise it would have been solved by now.
Exactly.
I would say that a couple of ways. One, and this is a lot of the work I do actually, so it's all about, because we know we're in a validated society, we're not going to go against the grain. A leopard cannot change its spots, for example. But what can we do to empower the individual so they get true confidence? True confidence, as in when somebody gives a negative thought, feedback, whatever it is, you understand how to process and digest that information so you don't crumble at the first sight. When you fall over in the playground as a child, you get back up. You know, you don't just get a medal for every little victory or achievement. You actually get it because you've earned it. There's a difference there. And schooling today, part of the parcel as well. It's a very different kind of education system. Everyone gets a medal for everything. So it's almost like, how do you get people to really feel that confidence, that true empowerment? Because it does, to your point, it starts at childhood. It starts as a baby. And this is something we actually might have mentioned on the podcast, for example. And I see this a lot, go to a playground and I see, little girls and little boys on the playground. And these are like 3-year-olds, 2 and 3-year-olds. The girl falls down, the caregiver, the parent, whoever it is, oh my gosh, are you okay? Come here, let me see. The boy falls down, says, oh, come on, you go back and try again. So they're hearing these messages from childhood, these gender discrepancies happening from childhood. In my own friend circle, it was during the pandemic, we have a pod of friends, and my daughter's birthday is, toward the end of the year. She's like, a Christmas baby. And so she never gets to really celebrate with her friends because school finishes. So we were celebrating with our pod, and in our pod, they all have sons. So they're like, oh, what does your daughter, want to get? And I said, well, she's into Formula One, she's into this, she loves superheroes and stuff like that. They heard she's into dolls, she likes playing dress up, because they don't have daughters, and it's their dream to gift a girl. So they all got her Barbie dolls and stuff like that. She said thank you, she was really happy to get them. But within the day, they were all broken because she used them for sword fighting. She used them because that's her personality. So my point being is that these gender stereotypes, and these are totally empowered, gender neutral, I'm fighting for equality, feminist friends of mine. But you see where I'm coming from. It's because of our own biases and own wants. We're doing this to ourselves. We're in a society of validation. We're in a society where we're almost talking ourselves out of hearing what somebody is saying. And we're almost trying to change the narrative. So it's just a matter of taking back. So it's almost like, if we start from that crux, that matter of understanding who we are, we go back to that root, that identity piece. Who are we? You be comfortable about who you are, and you can't. This doesn't happen in one day. Adolescence happens. You're constantly toying between one idea and another. This could take years and many life experiences to figure out. But it's, as long as you know that you're trying to find out and be happy with who you are at that moment, that's all you need. Because if you have that, you can then feel empowered. You can then be a better listener, understander of somebody else. And that's the decisions we take later on. So when you talk about, is it your father, is it your mother, is it your manager? It's everybody in a way, but it starts from you. Everybody needs to take responsibility. When I coach managers and teams all the time, it's more of a, and I'm going to again exaggerate the example here, it's more of a history lesson. This is what's happening, this is what's happening. These are some things you can do about it. With the individual, and I love focusing on the individuals because this is what you do about it. Yes, there are certain situations that exist. We cannot change the world around us. What we can change is our reaction to a problem or something that's happening. So it's very much about that empowerment comes from how we react and why. If we feel empowered and truly confident, we can change the world one step at a time, one person at a time. If somebody is empowered, if somebody feels confident, and you tell somebody else what's on your mind, and you put a smile on someone else's face, that's just moved on, and it's a domino effect. It's grassroots, it's one person at a time, and that's how it changes. If you just blanket try and force a view on somebody else, yeah, that's one way of doing it. Doesn't always help. It's like if I want my kids to go tidy up their room, I can do it in 2 ways. I can scream at them, say, go tidy up the room, what have you done? Yeah, they'll go tidy up. That's coming from a place of fear. They're going to listen to me.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Coming out from a place of understanding and love. Wow, what have you built there? That's quite amazing, actually. Well, I'm impressed. Tell me about it. But you know what? We've got to clear up some of this area. How about we move this aside and we can take care of that project for another time? Or let me take some pictures so we can save it in our memories forever, and let's do something else. So it's a way of doing it. It's how you're doing it for the overall aim of getting people to stand on their own 2 feet and really, really take acknowledgement and ownership of the issue.
Yeah. One of the arenas that I sort of hear this debate happening is, and I believe that you and I spoke about this a bit with Yangbo recently, is this debate between the sort of hierarchical organization and the matrix organization. And if I'm honest, I don't really buy that this change is really happening. I think it's happening by name, and I think it's happening by desire. I do believe that there's a tremendous desire on the part of, again, I'm doing this partially observationally, right, with CEOs and executive teams I work with, and partially from research, that there's this tremendous desire to be part of the solution, right? Everybody sort of wants to feel like, oh, I'm going to be a portion of creating this incredibly inclusive, environment where the whole team is going to thrive. But we're still going to have titles, we're still going to have pay discrepancies, we're not necessarily going to look at who is or is not listened to or valued. And so I think a lot of sort of CEOs and SVPs, et cetera, stay in this trap of sort of revalidating their own methods and then sort of sticking names on things, right? Well, we have employee resource groups, so therefore people can feel included. Those are just names for things, right? That has nothing to do with what the human being is experiencing when they're actually at that employee resource group, or then for that matter, leave that virtual or in-person room, right? And sort of re-enter the rest of the meeting or the rest of the work experience. Or they might say something like, well, now we're doing these 360 reviews or this new process where, we're kind of evaluating the emotional labor alongside sort of traditional forms of labor. But then who actually is deciding what is labor anyway? So, all of this is to say the desire in and of itself, and I'm going to be like a little bit crass, not to be crude, but to kind of make a point. Like in human physiology, right? If there's desire, there's like a tumescence. And if you think about the way that happens like energetically in an organization, it means that something is either going to become really uncomfortable on the part of leadership, where leadership is like sort of ready to burst, if you will, and they really, 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 really want their teams to feel included. And it almost becomes this like pent up energy. Rather than inviting people into the process and preparing themselves, to Rita's point about, it all begins with the self, preparing themselves to be a conductor of an environment in which everybody else can kind of nurture themselves. Because on the other hand, you can actually make your team step up into a sort of leadership type position either. That also has to come from themselves. But what folks at the top can do is to create that environment. Now, what does that not look like? It does not look like showing up and saying, hey, everyone, I declare this is a safe space. It cracks me up every single time. That does not work. That's not how a safe space is created. It's created through demonstrating that you are more dedicated and more in love with, frankly, having an environment of psychological safety, of belonging, where people can actually show up and articulate their experience and articulate solutions, or at the very least, things that they'd like to try, right? So we can all kind of workshop it together. That being in love with that process is really about where the leadership comes into play. It's not about the strategic plan on paper. It's not about your glossy two-pager that you're going to stick on your website. It's not about, your emblem that talks about your amazing culture. All of that is a reminder of your desire rather than a demonstration that you are totally, totally dedicated to the process of co-creating it together. Again, I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure that entirely did.
I mean, it is. It's and first of all, thank you, because it highlights a lot of soft skills or inner talents or hidden talents that are not on the paper,
when you get into a company that are looking, out for many skills and validate, as Rita mentioned, validate the precise path to get the job. It doesn't mean that, yes, you're a tough leader or someone that is very open. I mean, that's the job of the HR, and I mean, that's to detect these things. But again, that requires a lot of leadership. And I'm not sure that leadership today is at its best in terms of expression and in terms of willingness and in terms of restructuration and collaboration that is highly required for these times. So yeah.
There's just perhaps I'll add in real quick, and that is simply that. I would guess that each of you have heard some version of this as well, but a lot of leaders are afraid that if they show that they don't have the answers or they don't quite know what they're doing or they're nervous about a change process, that will somehow invalidate their leadership to the team. But all of the research shows that the team already sees how fallible they are. They already see their weaknesses. And frankly, the team is just craving and waiting for that person to show up and go, you know what? I have absolutely no idea how to tackle this. Will you help? They're hungry. That your team is hungry to hear that you know that you don't have the answers and that that's okay, and that also you're so confident in your own leadership, frankly, that you're not going to crumble or die of embarrassment or think that your team is trying to oust you in some sort of violent coup because you don't necessarily have all of the answers. the vigorous nodding. I appreciate it.
I'm really nodding my head there because I'm literally agree with everything you said. And to your point, it's leadership has changed as we've gone ahead in time. Once upon a time, leadership was very much based upon IQ was the one measuring fact. What did you score on this test? How did you do that? It's very black and white. And then couple of decades later came the EQ, the emotional quotient. How are you in terms of emotions? How you do this? Came the birth of the 360 reviews and things like that. Come now more, we have the birth of what I like to call the decency quotient. And the decency quotient is really almost like the addition. It's a bit of IQ, a bit of EQ, but it's the genuine desire of how to do right by others. So to Sarah's point, it could be just putting your hands up and say, you know what, this is what I'm doing. I've had so many years of experience, but you know what, I just don't know. And there's nothing more pleasing to your team to hear their manager do that. They actually respect you more. The research, to Sarah's point, has shown that they respect you more for that. They're less likely to leave the workforce. You're going to increase retention statistics. 79% of people leave the workforce because they don't trust their leadership. They feel like they're not valued. They feel like they don't feel that sense of belonging. It ultimately comes from because they think they have that bad boss. You might have a company that has the amazing sort of diverse inclusion banner strewn across the website, but if your leader doesn't get it, they're going to leave. So to the point of this, it needs to be more kind of that transparent, the more humane approach, that decency that I love to coin that phrase, that decency quotient, because it's really an amalgamation of what we've taken in the past. It's not one for the other. Historically, people confuse leadership. Oh, you're moving from this to that? It's a combination of that. And here's the other thing. Traditionally, we had a lot of males in leadership. It was very black and white. It's this or that, wrong or right. Then the empathy came in. Women have been shown to have a lot of the empathy. Decency, on the other hand, men and women both have, women more so. Decency is the genuine desire to do right by others. And there are so many male managers that has that. They just do not know how to kind of open that side of them. Women do it a bit more naturally. So in this age of leadership, it's all about coming together. Not about changing how you start, or not about changing how you speak to your team to be a bit more masculine, a bit more feminine. In leadership, it's all about the style of doing it. Can you delegate? Can you involve your team? How do they feel like they're taking ownership of the task at hand? They take ownership, they really understand it, it becomes theirs, and they care about it more than you do. That's what you want.
So well done. I'm curious, actually, if I may pose a bit of a question, if that's okay, Yael.
Go ahead, it's yours.
Yeah, I do believe that there's a lot of confusion within leadership about how to showcase a lot of this. So, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, Rita. You're sitting down with the CEO or an executive team or a bunch of managers or something, and they're sort of agreeing with everything, and they're going, "That makes sense," and yes, I want to do that. And they go, "Will you tell me what to do? Like, give me, checklist or a little, paint by numbers situation." And there are many different sort of activities and exercises and trainings that I do, and I'm sure you do as well. But one of the things that I do showcase, or I hope to showcase, is that, it's not about declaring something. It's simply deciding to sort of assume the position. And I've particularly done this around questions from a lot of these sort of all-white boards of directors that I've worked with, all-white management teams that I've coached around allyship. Everybody's like, I really want to be an ally. What do I do? So there's, again, like an A, B, C, D. And I'm like, hey, if it makes you feel good, sure, make a donation or read a book. I'm not saying don't do those things. But again, it's that process of literally like assuming the position, because if you're doing it on a surface level, you're going to stop when the crisis is over, or you're going to start, you're going to read the book and then say, I'm done. You're going to make the donation and say, I'm done. You're going to say, great, now we're funding employee resource groups. Okay, we're done. Whereas if you're deciding to embody the sort of ongoing stance of an ally, which I would argue is a sort of leadership role of sorts, it's really about checking in and saying, what kind of coworker do I want? Not even manager necessarily, not even leader. What kind of coworker do I want to be? What kind of employee do I want to be? What is my role when it comes to power flows within this organization? And then what kind of power flow does this organization and its programs, products, and projects having within the larger world? And to me, it really is sort of more of that like philosophical or internal reorientation that's way more impactful in the long run than donating to NAACP Defense Fund, which, by the way, go for it. I'm not saying don't, right? But that's not quite the point. So I that's sort of my conceptualization of it. I'd love to hear what you think.
And I'm nodding with that one as well, because we had the exact same example 2 weeks ago. One of my clients, very large tech company, comes to me saying, I want to be a better ally for this particular cause. I'm about to write the check to this company. The first thing I did was don't write that check. The first question I ask everybody is, what is your why behind doing this? What is your why? Why are you wanting to do this? Yes, the word allyship is out there right now. Yes, it is. It's a word. What does it mean to you? Why is it important? What are you trying to do for this? And it's almost like getting into the mind of it. And it's when I go back to talking about the decency quotient again, it's having the genuine desire to do right by others. So I said, okay, that foundation that you want to donate to, let's make an appointment. Let's get yourself and your family and get a couple of colleagues. You're going to go there, or we're going to Zoom there. We're going to actually get into that company, and you're going to volunteer your services, not just once, over a series of times, so that the funding you're going to give isn't just a fund. You're going to understand what you're doing, how it's making an impact, and why. Because that's the whole point of this. If you want to understand allyship, be an ally, not just writing a check. You've got to get in there. You've got to get your feet wet. You've got to get action, understand it. You want to support a cause, understand the cause. You've got to, by the end of it, understand how does that cause affect you. And we left it like that. We have another meeting in a week. We're going to find out how it's going to go on. And our next thing is that, how did it affect you? What does it mean to you? Because that's all part of it. Really changing the theory into practice, and they're two different things. One, absolutely, is the validation thing. It looks good from outside. It's going to go down in the papers. It'll be great on the next quarterly report. So we, donated this amount to da-da-da. But from yourself and actually doing something, it's going to be so much more valuable, not just to what you're doing and actually help the cause, but to you, your leadership, and your entire organization, by you actually donating your actual time to doing something there.
Yeah, this is precisely the difference between the society of validation and the inner self. What you're saying is that it's easier to get the validation from the external environment than my own validation to create something. And this is why, I mean, that's precisely the question. Why and how and where do you want to go with all these things? And this is precisely missing in the society right now.
I just wrote a piece. It's coming out, I believe, in about a month for the Society of Human Resource Managers, and it was stimulated because of a specific conversation I had about 6 months ago with a chief people officer who was completely overwhelmed. They're going, I feel like Gen Z is out to get me, right? These young people, they're so demanding, and okay, we'll chat about it, right? What's going on there? And this particular person was just flummoxed, just totally stopped, because they're going, all right, we've done a diversity statement, we've done XYZ donations, we again have our I forget what else they've done, a couple of other, large intergroup dialogue listening sessions or something like that. And our younger, Gen Z, fresher employees, they're still not satisfied. What the hell do they want from us? These young people these days. And I'm going, well, have you asked them what it feels like to show up at work? Have you asked them what their experience is at your company? And they're sort of stuck on, these whippersnappers want us to become social justice warriors. We're just a company. We create this particular app and this particular suite of software. Like, that's what we do. That's why we exist. And they're making this sort of claim that that's their why. And I'm saying, well, if your only why, literally your only why to exist is to churn out product and to take in money, how long do you think that's going to last? Do you really think that's future-proof? Do you really think that's crisis-proof? Do you really think that's, an invitation to your team? And they kind of stared at me like, oh, crap, it's one of those moments where you're sort of holding space for that's I guess, just concept to sink in. And, again, do I have all of the answers? No, of course not. I mean, Gen Z, I'm throwing that term around like that's one single person, sitting next to me complaining, right? Of course, that's not how this works. But I do think that there's this imperative on all of our parts to when we consider inclusion, when we consider diversity, think about things like generation and age or worldview. Maybe some of those components that are a little bit more changeable, or a little bit more malleable, because that 25-year-old is of course going to be 25 much longer, right? They're going to change, and then with that their worldview is going to change, their experience is going to change. But the one consistency is to sort of invite them into the strategy formation. If it's simply, I'm going to reach out to somebody because I pigeonholed them as, in this case with Gen Z, I'll ask them for tips on TikTok, right? Or perhaps if it's somebody who's a veteran, I'll ask them for feedback on hierarchical structures or something. It can't be that sort of one trick pony situation. There has to be this larger invitation into like, please shape us, please help inform us. How can I learn from you better, rather than this sort of virtue signaling thing that Rita, that you were just mentioning.
Well, amazing. One last word, Sara, Rita.
Please go for it.
I think just go back to the whole understanding of identity when we talk about diversity, equity, equality, inclusion, belonging, decency, the list can go on. Ultimately, it's about what does it mean to you as a person, having your own understanding of who you are, as a company as well. What is your ultimate value system, which comes from the first day the founders founded the company? What is the identity of the company? For you as a family unit, about to start a family for the first time, it's that, what is your value system now as partnership together? It all comes from that, setting that tone early on. When you have kids for the first time, set that tone early on. It's understanding that identity, that value system, because it's all about that empowerment journey. It's all about feeling that confidence, and that really starts from understanding your own identity.
I love that. I think just all of us here, I know, live this every single day. Really, women lifting up other women. I seriously am so inspired by both of you. I'm really thankful for our time together this morning, afternoon, evening. There we go. Sounds right. I look forward to more, and I think one of the places I'm at, just to get a little bit more like personal, even one of the places that I'm at is to really be just luscious in the process of learning from one another about inclusion and belonging, because it is at the end of the day a human process, and the more that all of us can kind of step into that with eagerness and joy, I think we're all on the right track.
Yeah, I had a long conversation earlier today also about that thing that we call generations and evolution. And as human beings, we have somehow two things that we're running after. The first one is, of course, food for survival. And the second one is about reproduction. And that question goes back to fundamentals of we as women, to build the next pillars in the next generation. What do we really want to offer and to give to the society? And what do we want to get back? Somehow, should we ask for something to get back, or is it much more about offering and giving what we have and sharing? And that's precisely, about belonging, justice, as you mentioned, Rita. And it's also about, that perspective, Sarah, you mentioned about motherhood, about being that status, being that representation for the society, and the validation that we expect is all about that. So that's an open question for the audience, and I'm looking forward, to having you in the next episode. Thank you, ladies. You're amazing.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for organizing this. It's been such fun.
Agreed. Absolute blast. Look forward to next time. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Speak soon.